Hi,
Yeah, we are.
everybody, and welcome to the November-December MSTA of Northeastern Ohio newsletter. And joining me today again is TJ Tennent, formerly employed by Bridgestone Tires, better known as the Tyre, Tyre, Tyre Guy. TJ, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. I'm really excited.
And so today I've got a couple of things, but before I get into that, I want to mention a quick sponsorship. A good friend of mine, Paul Gay, local guy, car enthusiast. He's the manager of many of our local Midas shops. And I want to thank him for being a part of this video. Paul is a car enthusiast. I take my cars there, and I can wrench, but I take my cars there because I don't want to. And been able to keep it in good shape, and they manage all of them. They're locally owned as of right now, and I like employee owned ESOPs, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that quality work done there, and they're great guys, and they do all kinds of things from general repairs, tires, exhaust systems, brakes, you name it, under that category of general repairs. And you certainly can count on them doing a good job. One of the things I noticed that they do is as they're going through your repair, say you're not on site, sitting out in the waiting room, they will send you pictures and updates of, hey, we're doing this, here is this, that. And so your comfort level gets pretty darn high with these guys. So I just want to throw a little plug out to Paul Gay and the local Midas shops. How about that?
Thanks, Paul.
All right. Yeah, he's a real car enthusiast, boy, I'll tell you. I wanted to talk about a couple of things. The first one is we're going to talk about the differences between sport touring, and touring tires. Then we'll follow up with the age of a tire and why it makes a difference. And finally, is it good to dynamic balance, or is beads okay? So let's go back to the first topic, TJ, the differences between sport touring, and touring tires, and when you can use sport tires on certain bikes and when you can't. So give us the benefit of your knowledge on that.
That's a great question because my son rides a Ducati Panigale, and
Ooh.
I suggested to him that we try some sport touring tires instead of the hyper sports that come as original equipment on that bike. And let me explain the difference between those two first. The difference between a hyper sport tire, if you look at the treads, the hyper sport has very few grooves in it, the little cuts in the tire. And then a sport touring tire will have lots more grooves in it. So a sport touring tire is set up to be used all season. So it's okay to use in the rain and the wet and stuff like that, even in a little bit of cold, which motorcycles are not really good for. And the biggest difference is going to be mileage. Out of those hyper sport tires on his sport motorcycle, he probably gets anywhere from 1,500 to 1,800 miles because he rides pretty aggressively.
Yeah, well, I hear you.
Which is a shame because it's almost $1,000 for me per set each time he needs to buy another set of tires.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted him to try the sport touring tires because clearly they're going to get more mileage. They're going to probably get up to 5 to 8,000 miles easily. But he said he didn't like them on his motorcycle, not because there was no grip. They didn't feel as good to him as the hypersport tires. And on a sport bike like that, or any high performance sport bike, it's really important that you feel good with the product that you're using. So if you try some different types of tires and they're not hooking up, the profile is different. So, and basically that's what he was trying to say without telling me the profile. The profile is more rounded and not as aggressive as a race tire would be. Now, of course, he doesn't ride in the rain or anything like that because I won't let him. But the ultra high performance, the ultra high performance tires are going to feel great for turning in, for coming out of the turn, for handling. If you've got to dodge something, that's what they're designed for. The sport touring tires are going to feel good in the turns. He said they didn't, but they should feel as aggressive because they're going to be dual compounds, maybe even 3 compounds. Mm-hmm. But when you're upright, it's got a different compound in the center of that tread. So it's going to give you that longevity. So that's where you get 5 to 8 or 9,000 miles. You should.
Well, when we look at, like you look at sport tires, strictly sport tires, like Dunlop qualifiers and that, which I've had on a couple of bikes, you're talking about soft compound, heats up pretty quick, and grips extremely well, and that grip is what causes the reduction in mileage on the tires. So, but one of the things I would ask you about is on a Panigale or any other motorcycle, is there specific instructions in the owner's manual that will tell you that we want you not just the tire size, but what compounds you think, or does it go to that level on say a Ducati, that they'll tell you what we really want you to run?
The owner's manual will talk about tire pressure, which is good for tire footprint, which is what gives you that friction or that grip on the road, but they don't mention actual compounds or anything. I think they want to stay out of any liability by not getting that specific.
Okay.
They don't trust the normal rider on the road.
Well, let's talk about the tire pressure. You mentioned that real quick. And I know that when I've done some track days, when I start dropping those tires down, and instead of running, say, 36 pounds on a BMW, I drop it down to 31. I've got a lot better handling machine in the corners and stuff like that. I often wonder why we don't run those poundages right for everyday street use.
That's a great question, because if you lower that tire pressure, it changes the footprint of the tire or the profile of the tire. Now when you lower that tire pressure, you've got a little more tire footprint on the ground. The drawback to that is the tire is going to run at a higher temperature. I don't know if you ever took temperatures, but I was like a temperature specialist at the track.
Mm-hmm.
It'll cut your mileage down about 40% on the road. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So if you're going to do a track day or something, I'm not going to say you can't do it, but be very careful what you're doing, because the tire temperature is going to run much, much higher. And if you have a tire pressure gauge, you want to check that tire temperature. If it gets over 250 or something, then you're a little too high, to be honest with you. But because you've got a bigger footprint on the ground, it feels like it doesn't just feel, you have more traction, especially the way they have the compounds, because you can get a dual compound high performance tire for a track day. And the center compound is very narrow compared to a super sport or something, which covers probably 75% of the tire. But because of that track day, it's just going to run hotter and the tire is going to wear quicker. You may not notice that 40% wear on the track, but if you take that same tire out on the road, you want to push that air pressure back up to a higher level. It'll shrink your footprint on the road, but it'll give you a little bit more life.
How can you tell when too little is too little? Like when you've dropped the pressure, I mean, is there a certain feeling that you'll get, feels like the tire's coming off the rim kind of thing? Or what, because I had been current when I raced, like just even a couple years ago, there's a Ohio Mini Road Racing League, and we all got together and we raced these little XR 100s. And I'd be at about 18 pounds on those little 16-inch hoops, but at some point, you could really feel like the tire's starting to wobble. And then I knew that I needed to go up in pressure.
When I was out at the track and I was managing the race teams at Bridgestone at the time, was working with, there are two things that I looked for as the tire engineer. Number one, I got to ask the rider questions, and I asked them some very specific questions, and you already referred to that. Hey, how does it feel at this pressure? And if they said it didn't feel dialed in and going into the curves, and that's when you can really tell in a transition and in a full curve, when you're in that full lean coming out. If they said it didn't feel solid or stuck on the track, I knew we were working too low on air pressure. The other thing that I looked for was the graining on the tire to see how much of the footprint was in contact with the track and whether it was gummed up. Sometimes you get those little balls and stuff.
Oh, yeah. They heat up.
Yeah. If you got too much of that, then I know. But of course, I always check the temperature too as soon as I could when they came in. But if it was too hot and the rider said that it didn't feel just spot on through the curves, and I looked at the tire and it had a lot of gumming on the rubber. And then I knew the tire was getting too hot. And from what the driver was saying, then I knew that we didn't have enough air pressure. So one of the things that I could do, and I never did multiple things, I do one thing at a time. And he'd come back in, and this is during practice, and then I could change something. Hey, how does it feel now? How does it feel now? And I'd go up about one, sometimes a half a PSI to get the thing dialed in. But on race day, if the ambient temperature is different, I got a little fruit fly flying around me right now. On race day, if you got to make some other changes if the ambient temperature is not the same or the track temperature is not the same. Then you've got to make some other adjustments. And sometimes it was just guesswork. So when I did my paperwork and I put what track we were at, I put what the track temperature was, what the ambient temperature was, and of course, if the sun was out or if it's cloudy or partly cloudy day, those things are important as well to adjusting the air pressure, not counting suspension, because the suspension can cause the bike to feel a little wobbly, right, like that too, if it's a little loose going into the turn. So you got to separate whether that was caused by the suspension or by the tire itself due to air pressure.
All right, going back, and I might have gotten you a little bit off track here, but going back to the sport touring and touring tires, I know that sport is generally, a lot of the super sport bikes, crotch rockets that they call them now. But as we start to move into the sport touring, that now opens up a much, much bigger category, which also includes a lot heavier road bikes. Any advice on when looking at tires? Certainly in your owner's manual, there'll be a stipulation there, weight-wise, or something to do with the weight. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Typically on a road bike, not necessarily on something you're going to do a track day, because that's a totally different animal.
Right.
You got to look at it very differently. But on a road bike, they are going to be heavier, and they will have in the owner's manual and on the placard, usually on the swing arm of the motorcycle. On some, they're called triple. Yeah. They'll have recommendations for load. So you want to weigh your motorcycle front and rear separately. You don't want to weigh the whole motorcycle together. So if usually a shop will have some scales because they weigh the bikes as well. You want to weigh them front and rear, compare that to what the manual says. And there's a book called the Tyre and Rim Association Annual Yearbook. And I used to be the chairman of the board for the motorcycle tire section. And they put recommendations on tire pressures in there. If you don't have one, and typically laymen don't, or just regular common people won't have one, you can actually get one. And just Google Tyre and Rim Association in Ohio, and it's just outside of Akron. And if one of the people answered the phone, tell them TJ said hi. But it'll give you recommendations on air pressure that you should run that are determined by the weight that's on each one of those sections of the motorcycle. That's a good way to do it. Or you can Google recommended weight, a tire pressure for your motorcycle, or you can go into the owner's manual. If you can get in touch with the tire manufacturer, and now that's almost impossible. I hate to say that, and they just don't answer the phones anymore, and I'm showing my age a little bit. And I think they don't answer the phones because they don't do as much of the time on their knees like I used to do. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I was on my knees because I'm a big guy. I'm like 6'4". I was down checking temperature, tread depth, what the tire looks like, talking to the rider. And everybody at work used to say, hey, man, you got the coolest job. And I'm like, yeah, I love it, but I got to be out there working, man. I don't get the ride. So there's several things you could check, and mostly I would try to get in touch with form a friendship with your local mechanic shop, because a lot of those guys race on the weekends, especially if they race. That's just a great person to talk to, and ask them what recommendations they have for you as well. But the sport touring motorcycles are so much heavier than a regular sport bike. One of the things you can look for on the sidewall of the motorcycle after the size, for instance, if it's a rear tire and it has 250 by 18 or something, after that, in parentheses, it'll have like 87H or something. And that's more like for a big bike. But you want to look for the highest speed rating that you can get. And Of course, on a sport touring bike, they probably won't be Z's or I mean not Z's. They won't be
Right,
Y's or
V.
W's. You see Y and W. So you see some tires that'll have ZR, and that ZR means
Oh yeah.
that tire's rated for higher than 49 miles per hour. That's all that means. It doesn't tell you a specific speed or anything. That later load index tells you what the speed rating is and what the max load of that tire is. And when we get into touring, full blown touring bikes, that is crazily important, especially if you're dealing with a bike like a Goldwing, GL 1600, GTL, Harley, something like that, big bagger. Then one of the problems that I'm seeing today, and I've seen that for the last decade, to be honest with you, is that the max load carrying capacity of those tires on one of those big baggers with your significant other, and it full of fuel, not counting anything being in the bags or anything, you could be very close or over the maximum load carrying capability of that motorcycle.
Oh,
My
sure.
team worked a case recently on a GL 1500, and that thing didn't have near the load carrying capacity on it that the newer GL 1800s do, and one of the tires blew out. And the first thing we did was check the load rating. This particular guy that works with me actually developed the tire for Dunlop for that bike when it was new. And even then, it didn't have enough load carrying capacity. So if you can weigh, no matter what bike you have, if you can weigh that motorcycle front and rear separately, and then see what the owner's manual says and compare that to what other people who ride similar bikes, or the service people, especially if they race, they usually have some good information. This where I live here in Nashville, some of the shops have me come physically to the shop and do a short 1 or 2 hour seminar to teach them about tires, and I can show them pictures and stuff like that and things to look for depending on which group I'm speaking with. But if you can get your hands on that local shop guy, that mechanic or whatever, especially, you can ask them. They'll tell you if they do any track days, or they'll be glad to tell you and talk about it. They are a very, very, very good source of information.
Oh, that's terrific. I know, even when you're talking about, big touring bikes, but one year I had a Hayabusa, and not only did it have high speed rating on the tires, but it had high weight rating on the tires. You had to be very careful and search through so that you could not only get something that was going to grip and last, but it would also carry the weight of that bike, which was must have been a heavier bike, but
it's very heavy for a sport bike, and it's just not
right.
a track worthy bike. I mean, I've seen guys use them on the track, but you've got a similar problem that I have. I'm 6'4", 290 pounds. So I got to be cognizant of what I'm riding, how much air pressure, and compare that to the weight that I'm carrying on the motorcycle. So I pay a lot of extra attention to the graining on my tires if I do a track day with my kid or something. And I need to understand exactly what's going on, because I'm not going to be just throw that thing into a turn the same way he can on a bike that weighs probably 377 pounds when I'm at 100 pounds heavier. Just the bike weight, 477 pounds wet.
Right. I would like to see a video of you getting in the Ferrari then. That would be good. At 6'4", sure. Yeah.
There's a picture of it, a recent picture, I think, on Instagram, and it's under TJ Tennent, Tennent, and we had my son was driving one of the new C8 Corvettes, and I was driving the Ferrari, and they both are almost identical. And there's pictures of both of them on there, backed up to each other. It's just a collage of pictures on there. And it was kind of funny because people were confusing the Corvette to be a Ferrari and confusing the Ferrari to be a C8. And we were in both cars right next to each other. That was just quite funny.
All right.
But
I wanted
no big deal.
I wanted to go and address what I call the elephant in the room when it comes to tires. There's so much of a misconception about the age of a tire and roadworthiness. You get those misconceptions when you follow certain people on Facebook, like on the videos. Scooter Tramp Scotty is one, but there's a plethora, including, and I'm really pleased and impressed with the amount of women that are vlogging and blogging, going around this country on motorcycles. Doodle on a motorcycle is one that I follow on that. But the big misconception, I've had guys that I think are pretty knowledgeable look at a tire I had on a Harley, and the date code on that was 9 years old. There was no cracks in the sidewall. There was well over 3/32 of an inch tread. And from someone that I know, which out mentioning him, who's safety conscientious, said, "No, I just run those. They look good." And I said, "Well, I don't think I can, based on." So let's talk about that, because there's a lot of guys that'll run these tires, and they're running a risk here.
I'm going to start out with a TJ-ism, which is a true or non-true TJ story or fact. That's what the guys who work for me call that, a TJ-ism.
Okay.
And the TJ-ism that I'm going to start out with is when was the last time you found a pencil in your house that was a couple of years old, and you tried to use it and tried to use the eraser on it, and that eraser basically just crumbles apart? It looks fine. It probably even feels the same way. It will crumble apart.
It's so hard. It's so hard it won't even erase.
It's so hard. Yeah, it won't erase. And then it'll break apart when you try to use it. So that eraser is made of natural rubber. What are tires made of, by the way? Rubber and steel. So here's how you read that date code on that tire, which is just usually around the bead area. The date code is usually 4 numerical and 1 letter. The 4 numerical, the first 2 digits of that numerical date is the week that tire is made. And the last 2 are the year. So if that date code has 5, and it'll say DOT, and that stands for Department of Transportation, and it's usually up to 11 to 13 digits. You look at that, and I'm going to give you an example. The date code may have 5224. That means that tire was made in the 52nd week of 2024. That's how you read it. And then it'll have the W after it, or whatever letter. And that is the speed rating on that tire. So that the proper name for all those 5 digits is load index. But actually, that's the date code after that. So with the date code, if you're concerned about your tires and when they age out, I'm just going to be honest with you. Motorcycle tires are unique animals. They are super duper unique. As a matter of fact, when I was in the industry, we didn't ship any motorcycle tires to Canada, because if you're carrying them by hand and it's below freezing for any amount of time, you drop the tire would crack like an ice cube, literally. Really? So we didn't ship any to Canada, and nobody does in the wintertime. It's just too much of a liability, a hazard. Or if you leave your motorcycle outside. I had a call from a customer one time who ratcheted down his dirt bike, and he heard the tires crack, and he was just ratcheting it down on the back of the truck. He left it outside. So with that date code, the standard for passenger and light truck tires is after 5 years, the tires need to be inspected internally and externally up to 10 years, and then it's highly, highly recommended that they be taken out of service. Motorcycle tires are very different animals. They are made of a lot more natural rubber than synthetic rubber. So with that natural rubber, they're going to be more susceptible to age and not necessarily dry rotting, because they probably weren't dry rotting when you talk to your friend. They weren't down to the wear bar, which tells you when the tread's worn out on there. But if they're at 5 years old, and I'm going to be so serious about this, because we've worked the last probably 10 motorcycle wrecks we've worked, accidents, single vehicle accidents where the tires blew out. The tires were, I think the newest one was 7 years old, and the oldest one was 10 years old. None of them were over 10 years. And all of them looked great visually. If you looked at them, they looked like they were brand new. I'm just going to be honest with you. They look brand new. So you can't look at a tire and determine if it's still good. There's a device called a durometer, which tells you the hardness of the tire, but most people don't know how to use one. But if you can check the hardness of those tires, you'll see as they get older, that rubber gets a lot more brittle. And if you're riding a big bike with a lot of weight on it, if I'm sitting on it, it's going to be a lot of weight, then there's a very high propensity for that tire to become disabled while you're on it at the most inopportune time. So the age of a tire, of a motorcycle tire, once it gets past 5 years, so you're going to look at that DOT date on that tire, and you want to make sure it's not more than 5 years old. So if it's, what is it, 2025 now, and we're in October, so if it's been around longer than probably October or the 45th, the 47th week of 2020, it's too old. You got to get it off that motorcycle. And I'm saying that in all seriousness. And that's part of the problem in the motorcycle world is you got so many people who don't have any expertise in tires. And a lot of people think it's easy. I had a guy come from Australia to watch me do a lecture, and he said, I can do that. I said, I don't know. I said, can you do heart surgery? And he said, no. I said, you can probably watch somebody do it. Can you do it then? He said, no. I said, well, you can't do what we do just because it looks easy. Of course, it looks easy when I talk about it. But when they're motorcycle tires can't be more than 5 years old. They just can't.
When you talk about inspecting a tire, let's talk about the interior of a tire. Say I've got a tire that I suspect from the date code net that I don't want to use. But if I take the tire off the rim, what am I looking for on the inside of the tire? Because I've never really thought about that.
Wow, Larry, that is such a great question. I'm so impressed with you every time I talk to you.
Yeah, I think you're buttering me up here. So.
With tires start to deteriorate from the inside before anything ever appears on the outside. Oh. So when you remove that tire from the rim, and this is any tire on a bicycle, on a motorcycle, car, truck, commercial truck, it doesn't matter. When you look at a tire on the interior of that tire, if there's no tube, if it's the tubeless tire, inside, if there's rubber dust inside of that tire, it's dead. If there are rubber pebbles inside of it, it's dead. If the inner liner is starting to separate from the casing, it's dead. If the inner liner is crinkled like an old person's skin, you got crinkled skin, if it looks like that, that tire's done. And you may look at the outside, look at that tire externally, and it may be fine. It may look great, may handle great, may not even perform differently. But if you see any of that in any kind of tire, whether it's passenger light truck, motorcycle, whatever, that tire is then dead. You have got to get rid of it. If the service person sees that, at minimum, the service person should ask you, if it's severe enough, did you ride this tire while it was flat? What air pressure did you operate this tire at? If the service person doesn't ask you that, you need to make him abreast that he needs to be aware of that and notify the customer that he or she may be operating these tires with not enough air pressure to carry the load, because that's what the air pressure is about, carrying the load.
I've got which is a great segue into the next topic, which is balancing a tire. Now, I've got balancers at home, and I can static balance the tire. But sometimes I take my tires off, and I'll take them, especially if they're going to be a harder touring kind of tire where it'll be harder to bar it off. And in one particular instance, this shop, all they use is beads. And they explained to me that the more the tire wears on its tread, the more in balance it'll stay with the beads. But then I started thinking about what you just said. The degradation starts from the interior rather than the exterior. Would there be, or could there be, degradation caused by the beads themselves centrifugally bouncing around in there?
The answer to that question is, if they are legitimate tire beads, there should be no degradation associated with having those tire beads inside of the tire. But I've seen golf balls inside of tires, and I know that sounds crazy. If you put something that's not supposed to be in there, it's going to cause some damage to the internal portions of that tire. So make sure they're designated tire beads. And when I say tire beads, some look like beads, some look like just a sack of dust. And you put them in there, and what they do is through centrifugal force, they go to the part of the tire. If the tire is not balanced properly, that's on the low side, and that's where it tries to keep it balanced statically. Now, when I was in the racing department, those guys use bubble balancers, basically static. They didn't use high speed, even in the Indy
that's
racing.
The old stuff.
Yeah, even in the Indy racing league, open wheel racing, they use static balancers, and those vehicles are running 200 miles an hour. And some of the motorcycles that are out there with some of the sponsored teams are operating close to 200 miles an hour with no complaints. But if you can, you definitely want to try to get a high speed balancer that'll not only tell you where to put the weight, but on what side of the wheel to also put the weight. That's the best opportunity. Now, all motorcycle manufacturers have a policy that if you cannot balance the tire, they will take it back. No, as long as it's not worn more than 1/32, they will take it back. So if you can't balance the tire, then you can take it back to your dealer or send it back to your online retailer. They will take it back and they will send you another tire at no charge. They will probably charge you shipping and handling if you order it, but that's all they will charge you. So they want you to have the best product, but very rarely is the motorcycle tire out of round or not balanced properly. Usually, if you do have a problem balancing the tire, it's probably in the wheel, not necessarily in the tire itself.
Just quickly before we wrap up here, and then I'll announce the topics for next week. But one of the things that I noticed, that I had a tire that I'd mentioned to you that had a high spot in the center. And I did go back to, what would it be? The distributor, not the manufacturer, but the distributor. And in order for me to start moving this along, they wanted a dozen pictures, which I understood. And then, and it's never even been on the road. It's been on the rim, and I spun it and it hit the center of the swing arm. And so I just never bothered with it. And
that's unusual. I don't see the point of asking for pictures, because most of the times that happened, that tire will have never been on the wheel, on the road. You would have just gotten that tire and had it mounted on the wheel, and you're just trying to balance that daggum thing. So typically in my, because some of the guys who work for me have worked for Goodyear and Pirelli and all that, and we've talked about what the warranty policies were, and they're all the same. Almost all the verbiage is the same. It's like they all copied some verbiage they found somewhere, and they all say that even if it's been operated, as long as it's not worn down more than 1/32, and you just can't balance it, you just send it in. Just send it in with your receipt, and they will send you another tire at no charge. If it's online, like I said, they'll just charge you the shipping and handling. But I have a buddy, he swears by balance beads, and he asked me about the balance beads, and I said, look, if you feel more comfortable, and your bike has a better ride, a smoother ride with the balance beads, go ahead and use them. I'm never going to say not to use them as long as they don't damage the tire. You got to use regular band. You can't throw a couple golf balls in there or anything like that, but use the balance beads. But all manufacturers have a process to handle out of round tires.
Okay. All right. I'm getting ready to let you go, but I certainly want to thank you, and I want to wish you and your family a terrific Thanksgiving. I can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge, as you've always done over the years, Annette. In the next segment, we're going to talk about warranty issues, balancing tires, and which is best, and how do you know which is best, and which tire to pick for what you're going to be doing, and finally, tire pressure sensors. So I thought maybe we would get into those 3 or 4 different topics, and which should be fun.
Wow, you got me all excited already. Is it next month yet?
Yeah, it will be. It will be. But you know what? We're going to probably take a break through December, but I may come in, if it's all right with the guy that does everything. BJ here, and we'll see if we can record in December for a January issue and kind of move it along. But certainly, TJ, wishing you and the family, and of course, prayers for your wife and everything else. Everything hope as well, and you guys have a lot to be thankful for Thanksgiving, as I do.
Thank you, guys. I hope y'all have great holidays. And I just want to say God bless you all, and to your listeners out there. Thanks for tuning in. Larry is really great at asking me some challenging questions and making sure that I'm giving you the right answers. So thank you for that, Larry.
All right, buddy. You take care, and I'll catch up with you next month.
You as well, brother.